Okay, so for this Paleo Futures, I'm going to bring up somebody that I think we both really like, and that's Norbert Wiener.
Cool.
So he was a futurist in his day. Been around. I think he started like in the 40s, really writing about this stuff, and it really kind of advanced throughout his life, all the way up until the 60s when he passed away. But what he talked about really was about robotics. Like, what was one topic that I think that he was really great. He wrote, this idea of the rise of robots, of automation as like the second industrial revolution, machines replacing human labor. So he talked about really, I mean, very futuristic stuff. How there would be automated, factories and facilities where it's just robots operating in them. This is somebody who wrote about this in the 40s, like the late 40s, early
Mm.
50s, when we were just even starting to think about robotics, and definitely not on the scale of what he was describing. So I really like what he has to write, what he wrote about. He wrote multiple books and white papers and all of this stuff about what he was thinking. And then he talked about really some of the societal and ethical implications. We can't say
Mm.
words today. Implications of what all of this means. So, Chris, I know you are a huge fan of him as well. So, tell me about your thoughts about what he wrote and kind of where you think it is now. Maybe did what he write come to pass in your
Oh,
mind?
I mean, 100% prescient, absolute futurist. To me, I think there's a couple people. So there's Norbert Wiener, and I want to be really specific to you. You brought up the word automation, which we've been talking about a lot. If you work in tech, if you're in around tech, if you're in manufacturing, automation is like a big thing, for us. Uh, his word, he called it cybernetics, which we did mention, this circular causal feedback recursion, where the effects of the system are, there's like a homeostasis behind that. And I'm going to put a pin in that because I wanted to sort of discuss it. But Norbert Wiener was this guy, like you said, talking about this in the 40s. And he saw that if you actually created systems of these automated feedback loops, you could actually create a whole interconnected system that could power something that's really complicated. And so he saw the computing world that we have now as we talk about AI, as we talk about robotics, as we talk about automated whatever you want. This is the guy who was actually talking about it. And I think what's really interesting about him is that he did not just do it within this very specific lens. He looked at how it would impact the future of engineering, of course, economy, ecology, the legal aspects. He talked about how it could impact, essentially like people's jobs, because if we automate everything, you're like, there's a couple like quotes that he says. I mean, here's one of my favorite ones. Let us remember that the automatic machine is the precise economic equivalent of slave labor. Any labor that competes with slave labor must accept the economic consequences of slave labor. What's he
Oh yeah.
saying? He's saying that if you have slave labor, like an automated machine, you might actually have to accept that that's going to take away your labor, right? I mean, and he
Yeah.
sort of understood this. He understood that this cybernetic world was going to impact us in multiple ways. His first two books, I mean, he had so many. He had this really specific sort of short write up. It was kind of cybernetics, or the control or communications in the animal and the machine. So this is very
Mhm.
much talking about this kind of automatic world. And I know
Yep.
we'll come back to this, and I'll talk about systems thinking in just a little bit because I'm going to go right back to you. But to me, like, I think where it really made a lot of sense, and it's his longer book. I highly recommend this book to everybody. It came out in 1954, or excuse me, 1950. It was revised in 1954. It's called The Human Use of Human Beings, Cybernetics and Society. This
Mhm.
book breaks down our entire world currently right now. So
Yes.
whether this is how we go against the sort of automatic world and what it's like, how you actually need to use language and symbolism in order to create the code to derive this world. This is where eventually, like, our code world, came from, going into John von Neumann and even Turing. So in some ways, Wiener, John von Neumann, and Alan Turing were essentially our godfathers that created the world around us. And so him as like a kind of strategic thinker, like, really set up the stage for our current IT environment. But even further, he talks about the mechanization of society. He talks about how communications will be interconnected in ways that will never will, how humanity may be obsolete because we're going to create these these cogs that are going to do all this work automatically for us? And then also what happens when we create this? What are the values that human beings create when humans are outside of it?
Mm.
And when these machines may take away our creativity and or freedom. This is so prescient what this guy was saying in 1950
Yes.
before we had this new computational world we're going through too. In some ways, like we all need to read Norbert Wiener right now to kind of deal with what we're dealing with right now, to know that there were people thinking about this. So I cannot say enough about this guy. Absolutely brilliant.
So one of my favorite, like you mentioned, like one of his phrases. So he talked about the robo-apocalypse. So
Mm,
like that, like this is a guy in the 40s and 50s talking about the robo-apocalypse. That's the crazy things he talked about. Like, he said, like, look, it's not inevitable, but he's talking about, machines replacing people. You mentioned, like,
mm,
replacing this like slave labor idea, and that the machines may not always do what we wanted them to do. He also said there's issued warnings over reliance on these machines, right? So we get to the point where we are no longer actually able to do these things, right? Because we've forgotten it because we've given it all to machines, right? So I think that there's a lot of things that he talks about that that are now still present, right? Like in today's society, right? Of all of these automated facilities we want to build, all of these ideas of, he even talked about like AI, like large language models and robotics advancing rapidly. He talked about those kinds of things. And so, I think that that's really interesting. And one of the things that I think also was really interesting was he talked about warfare,
mm,
robots in war. No one was talking about that. Like, think about it.
mm.
This was, 5, 7 years away from, World War II, where, they had just invented like tanks, like, the powerful tanks, all of these other things. I mean, they weren't really talking about robotics. They were talking about, missiles and things like that that were dumb. And now you're talking about someone who's thinking that, thinking like Terminator level like ideas, right? Of, a world completely overrun by evil machines and robots. So it's really fascinating. Like, and
Yes.
now it's actually becoming accurate. Look at the drones that they're using in the Ukrainian and Russian war, right? They're
Yes.
now putting AI into those, and they're going out and they're killing people. AI is recognizing a target and killing someone, right? Maybe away from a drone operator, right? That is where we are now. Imagine where we'll be in 10 or 15 years. So this is very prescient in my mind.
It's very prescient. And I think the things is when we think, let's take a step back and just talk about what machines do. These computers allow us to do. They allow us to make computations and make specific directions in everything from how we track everything on Earth to how we automate certain processes and machines to how, frankly, now we can dissect what wants and needs human beings need for economic purposes, or even how to choose political candidates, right? It's stuff that comes to us each and every day, and it's in front of us, and we have to deal with it all the time. It's on our phones, it's on our televisions, it's at the gas stations, it's the economy, it's the basis for everything. And there was none of that when this guy was first speaking about it. I do want to kind of like double click a little bit on sort of this idea of cybernetics and automation. And the reason why is because when we talk about cybernetics and automation, these ideas, I always want to talk about the circular process, the feedback and recursion, feedback loops. That was a real big idea when it comes
Mhm.
to feedback loops. And, a futures thing, I'm going to shout out the University of Houston Master of Science in Strategic Foresight, something that I know and love. I have a Master's of Science in strategic
Oh,
foresight, of
Andy
course, future
Hines.
studies. And systems thinking is a class in it, and systems thinking is about feedback loops and how you look at larger systems and you see how they interconnect and how and you'll see these little loops right here. This one's very simple. It's the causal loop diagram. There's a person in the middle. Their body increases. They sweat. Their body decreases. Same thing, body temperature decreases, they shiver, which causes heating activity, and then the body increases. That's a very simple idea around how the body automatically takes care of your temperature. And this happens in so many different parts of the body. So what
Mhm.
Norbert Wiener was talking about was what happens when society does this. There has to be automatic like mechanisms for how we build cities and how we create industry and how we can automate vehicles and robotics and all these things. Even what's crazy is the whole society itself. Norbert Wiener not only drove the ideas around computational direction when it comes to folks like John von Neumann, who of course was the part of von Neumann architecture that created the modern computer. People like Alan Turing, of course, of the Enigma code fame, who frankly is to me really the father of computing, the father of
Right.
AI. That's where all of these ideas come from. You know, ones and zeros, the idea of the Turing test, of course, and what makes a human being. So I'd call if there is a Mount Rushmore of the computer age or the AI age or whatever, I think Wiener and von Neumann and Turing are definitely on that. But he impacted even folks like Gregory Bateson and Margaret Mead. These are anthropologists who studied people that are living in the islands in Polynesia. And they had ideas on if things can be automatic in machines, maybe human beings are just machines, and how we work on the world is machine like. This dovetails into everything from computational and communication systems all the way to chaos theory. I mean, this is such a deep thinker. Frankly, he's just so fascinating. And I think in some ways, the basis of everything he talks about is really the basis of like what we currently deal with all the time. And I think that's what makes him like really interesting.